Well, we're really excited to launch Head for the Hills with Glenn Crouter. It's an FYI podcast, and we need to tell you this podcast is brought to you by eWool. Turn the heat on. Keep the fun going. Let's get started. Well, here we are. Look at that. We talked about this for the last, month or two, just a concept, an idea, and it has finally happened. It is the inaugural, the first ever episode of Head for the Hills. It's an FYI podcast, and happy to welcome in Glenn Crouter. This is going to be fun, Glenn. I'm looking forward to this.
This is going to be great, Dave. I'm glad you brought up this with Bear and your daughter. This is going to be spectacular.
Yeah, so the idea here is we're going to spend, 6 weeks or so, what we call kind of a pop-up or a pocket limited podcast series, but to talk about the industry itself. And, there's a whole bunch of subjects that we want to get into. Glenn, you and I talked about it before Christmas, how much more diverse this demographic has become over the last few years. It really is a place where there are people coming to this country and embracing Canada, and all of a sudden they're also embracing these great winter sports, and skiing happens to be one of them. So there's so many things that we want to talk about. Family days coming up. There's going to be events going on there. And a lot of people would have been looking forward to how, occupying kids coming to the March break. And I know here in Toronto, the hills at Earl Bales and Centennial get good use. Unfortunately, it sounds as if we're going to have to kind of curb some of that enthusiasm around these facilities. Howie Dayton is the director of community recreation at the City of Toronto, and it is his task to oversee what goes on at Centennial and Earl Bales. Howie, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I guess we're into a bit of a conundrum in terms of use of the ski hills, who's going to use them, how they're going to be used. Tell us what's going on at Centennial.
So we made best effort to kind of assure the public to get Centennial Ski and Snowboard Center up and running this year. It was scheduled to open at the beginning of January. Unfortunately, unforeseen mechanical issues cropped up, and despite best efforts to repair them, we were unable to, and the determination was that the replacement parts required were going to take probably about 14 to 16 weeks to arrive, which would take us past the mid-March period when the ski center would be scheduled to close. So we had to make the difficult decision to communicate with the public that we would not be able to open it this season. I will say that we were able to operate and offer a number of beginner lessons for the first few weeks of the season. And we've been notifying those registered in those programs, as well as the programs that required the lift, that we would have to cancel the session and refund them for the fees. So that is, in a sense, the story. Unfortunately, it was a big disappointment for everybody, for sure.
Howie, it's Glenn Crouter here. Thank you very much for joining us. We talked last night extensively, and when you think about Toronto, a lot of people don't think about skiing. I know there isn't a history of Toronto. There was a ski resort just off the DVP to the left. If you're traveling south, you can still see the chair towers there, and that's interesting in itself. But again, when I mentioned there's two ski hills in Toronto, people go, "What? Where?" Have you faced that concern in the past, getting people not only excited about skiing, but also the fact that you're open and available? Now, Centennial, as you mentioned, is closed, unfortunately, but now we move over to Earl Bales. Is there a focus there that's trying to attract people to get to ski there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, Earl Bales has a long history in the city, pre-amalgamation and post-amalgamation. So it has a big following. I have to say, it's a very unique situation that we're incredibly proud of to have two urban ski centers in the city. It's very unique, and we're fortunate to have that and enough council support to continue to operate it. Earl Bales is very popular. We run hundreds of instructional ski and snowboard lessons, offer leisure ski. We've got about 5,000 registered program spaces available 6,000 at Earl Bales, about 4,000 at Centennial. So combined with the two ski centers, we were offering about 12,000 instructional program spaces for primarily beginner learn to ski, which is a great way to feed the more competitive or upper level skill-based programs. And we also offer a ton of leisure ski opportunities, leisure snowboard opportunities, ski rentals. So Earl Bales draws people in. It's so convenient to get to. It's on transit. But for sure, we've done a ton of promotion. We've made those that are impacted at Centennial aware that there could be some program spaces available for them if they can make it over to Earl Bales. And the mayor did announce a big welcome to winter plan for Parks, Forestry, and Recreation this year. That includes a whole bunch of outdoor sport and recreational opportunities for the public, given some of the lack of indoor opportunities, ski being one big part of it. So we were really happy to be able to reopen this year because last year we were not able to operate due to COVID restrictions.
Just locate Earl Bales for us, Howie, because when I was a kid, that was a golf course up there. And
was it really?
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
And
Don Valley, it was York Downs, wasn't it?
I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it was a golf course, and we used to ride our bikes through there and get hell for doing that anyway. But I remember when they opened it up, and when we all thought this was kind of, to Glenn's point, a cool idea to be able to have this kind of facility in an urban center. So just locate that for us.
Sure. It's Bathurst Street, just south of Shepherd. So the address is 4169 Bathurst Street. And there's a big park. It's a massive park that the ski center is. You have to kind of traverse the park and you get to the ski center near the community center and outdoor amphitheater.
Howie, have you noticed my traveling in the last 2 years, certainly since COVID hit, I have noticed a change, a diversification, a fantastic reflection of what Toronto is experiencing and what Toronto enjoys. Have you noticed that on the ski hills? Because I ski in Banff. I'm heading to BC in 2 weeks. I've talked to all the owners across the country, plus locally, and they've all said, yes, there's been an influx of new interest in skiing from, I could say maybe from other countries, from people from other countries. Have you noticed that at Earl Bales and before Centennial as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have. I mean, I would say that our participant base in all of our programs and services are reflective of the increasing diversity of the city. And, the good news is that because it's a municipal service, council really does try to make it accessible and affordable and welcoming of newcomers and just folks who haven't tried it before, who may not have had ski hills and from their country of origin and that sort of thing. So absolutely, it increases to increasingly attract a more diverse user base that continues to be reflective of the changing demographics of the city, both age, gender, and perhaps culture as well.
I know you've got a hard stop here, Howie. But before you go, I just want to get a sense of what the implications of. Now, you alluded to the idea that the hills were really closed down for most part last year because of COVID. We've had challenges this year. Centennial facing issues, not necessarily because of COVID, but because of the supply chain issues. What kind of pressure does that put on looking forward here for both of these sites?
Well, we're going to have to obviously have a plan around Centennial for next year, and it's too early to say what that is. So part of the work going forward will be to understand what the capital considerations are and how available those parts are and how we will move that repair forward. So that'll be the next steps of work. And then with respect to Earl Bales, I would say that we continue to obviously invest in its operation and upkeep and maintenance, and work with on the public health side, Toronto Public Health and provincial regulations to guide how we safely operate under the COVID context. This year, we were able to lift many of those restrictions that then allowed the ski hill to operate, and they continue to change, and we adjust as we go. So my hope is that by next year we're operating in a pre-pandemic state without the the restrictions, but we'll obviously pivot and adjust as we need to keep everybody safe and healthy.
Howie, I've got just one more question here. With the closing of Centennial, we want to make sure that people realize it closed as of yesterday. So this is kind of breaking news in a sense. What happens to that employment pool? Do they transfer over to Earl Bales? Is there other opportunities for those people that may be just finding out that they're not working today or through the weekend for the rest of the winter that work at Centennial?
So we have been in communication with our part-time staff, and absolutely was a disappointment to them and to us that we had to disrupt their employment as a result of the closure. But I will say that we have many opportunities in the recreation area for staff to work, and so we've been offering them alternate shifts, whether it's at Earl Bales or at our skate locations or community centers, and prioritizing those shifts for those folks that have been displaced. And it's really just whether or not they want to take on that work, and we sort of work with them on that. And then they have some priority opportunities to come back next year to Centennial.
How many would that be? What would that number look like, Howie?
We had about, I would say, 100 staff that were impacted.
Not insignificant. That's
not
okay.
Insignificant. No.
Listen, I know you got to go. So listen, thanks for joining us today on the first episode of Head for the Hills. It's a pleasure to have you, and we'll have to have you back to kind of catch up and see how things are progressing at the city facilities. Howie, thank you.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Howie.
Bye-bye.
Howie Dayton is the Director of Community Recreation at the City of Toronto. And again, for those of you who might have had plans or thoughts of getting to the ski hill at Centennial this weekend, you're going to have to adjust those plans. Okay, just before we get back to our conversation with Glenn Crouter, I just want to tell you a little bit more about e-wool. You've been out when it's been really cold, whether you are on the slopes, maybe you're cross-country skiing, maybe you are snowmobiling, and that wind, doesn't matter how many layers, just kind of cuts right through you. So imagine if you could put on a vest and warm up in 3 seconds. This is the coolest thing on the planet. So they've got this e-wool Pro technology, this high-density internal heating system combined with up to 51 watts of power, produces more heat per square inch than any other technology. And it means you have fewer layers, more mobility, so that you can kind of really enjoy your time out on the slopes when you're snowmobiling, snowshoeing with the kids, whatever it happens to be. If you want more information, drop by their website, ewool.com. Glenn Crouter here. I'm Dave Traffford. It's Head for the Hills, and you hear this, I hear this all the time about why is the city in the business of golf courses, right? And I just think that it provides a huge opportunity for another demographic. Those, relatively speaking, the city courses are affordable, and they're accessible by transit. The Don Valley's right there on the subway. Dentonia is there on the subway. There's all these places that you can go fairly easily. The idea that you could be exposed to this sport, which is typically considered probably more expensive than golf in many respects, that's the perception. To be able to get there on the subway or on a bus fairly easy is exceptional.
Oh, it truly is, Dave, when you think about it, because I'm up and down the 400 corridor over the 401 as well, and it is horrendous, the amount of traffic. And we keep on thinking that people have enough money to have a car, for one, be able to drive up to these ski resorts for two, and be able to afford the $100 lift ticket. And we didn't have a chance to get into it too much, but what is really amazing, these are grassroots ski resorts.
Yeah.
So not only do people learn how to ski, but also instructors are important, because I've read a couple of social feeds, and there's one gentleman that mentioned my sons learned how to ski at Centennial at that time. Of course, it's closed now just for the season. And they said now one's a level 4 instructor in Banff, another one's a level 3 instructor in Whistler. So you can see that really transitions across again, not only just be able to go to ski, but for the fact of people, plus a lot of people, these are first time jobs for these kids, like right out of school, high school and things. So this is a great learning ground for financial implications in the city as well, and also for them to get their feet on the ground and working at a small city golf course or small city ski resort for sure.
Yeah, and that 100 jobs is not insignificant, but glad to hear that they're going to be able to at least offer alternative shifts for some of those workers. One of the things that you and I have talked about often over the last number of years is the economic impact and the economic security that so many of these resorts, whether it's in the summer or the winter, because many of them, as you often say, these are year-round operations, are critical to the economy of smaller communities in central and northern Ontario, et cetera. So it's kind of the other extreme where we've got this big economy in Toronto supporting these two small hills. It's the other way around when we get into ski country, and I love the story at Sir Sam's, and you and I sort of flirted with the discussion. Must have been just before Christmas. That's just changed hands, and after that, I'm thinking, here we are. We've got somebody investing in, at the time, was an industry that's under pressure because of COVID. Yeah. Even in the best of times, that might have been, really, is that where you want to put your money? But I got to admire the courage here, or maybe a little bit of the craziness that goes with
a little bit of both.
A little bit of both, right? Where you're investing in it at the time when you can't have people in your lodge, or 50% capacity. Who's crazy or courageous enough to be doing that?
A gentleman named Doug Wilkinson, a Toronto accountant, University of Brock. He was trained, and this is something. And I just came back from Sir Sam's. I've been going there for probably 20 years, and I've known the Bishop family who owned it before, and they went through some very transitional times as well. Now, what happens was when Doug took it over, the uncertainty, and again, this was something that I said to myself, are you a little like off the side here, buying a resort when we could be shut down this winter? And he goes, no. He said, my family grew up here, much like the Bishops. It's the second oldest family-owned resort in Ontario. The Bishop family had it for 55 years. Now Doug Wilkinson taken over, and it's under the Wilkinson family. So he said, I want to basically have it under the family name as well. And his kids are very young. So he said, I plan to have this for 55 years. He's planning to retire up in the area as a cottager. So back to the psyche of buying it, I said, this is a little different. Like, no one I know right now, other than big companies like Skyline and the big ones and the companies out of the United States, Vail Company, are buying resorts. He said, yeah, it's a little crazy. But he said, and people even suggested, because he's a Bay Street boy, what are you doing with all that kind of money? I don't know the disclosed amount of what he paid. Doesn't matter. But at the same time, he's put his heart and soul into it. Started renovating already. So again, it's a fact of he's surprised everyone, I think, in this day and age of buying a ski resort and a large ski resort, a nice hidden little gem up in Haliburton. So I give him my hat goes off to him, and it's a great story. The Bishop family is a great story. Now the Wilkinson family will carry on. Yeah,
I think of the other extreme, Michael Hollett. Michael's the CEO of North by Northeast. He was the former founder of Now Magazine. He started a new magazine in the COVID. Next magazine launched in the middle of COVID, and I had the same conversation with him. And Michael expresses the same thing as, the new owners at Sir Sam's, and that is there's just, there's a passionate connection here. And I think out of the COVID, we're going to see a lot of this in terms of entrepreneurs and businesses who survive. They do so because there's a level of, obviously, support, but there's resilience and passion behind what they're doing.
Well, remember I was at, I can't remember it was just before Christmas Day, but I was on with you when News Talk 1010. We were talking about some of the events that are going on in the city. And I went to the Hobby or Spring Show.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that resonated for me. And I said, wow, these people have taken their hobby because they've lost their jobs. All of a sudden through COVID, something's happened. And now they have to transition their life and their livelihood over to a hobby. And that's when I was going through the place and I was talking to people, and some didn't even know how to sell. They had fantastic products, but they were so shy. They'd never had to face the public before. So that was something that I really noticed was people, how they can transition. So it's human nature, the survival instinct we have. And that's exactly what they did. And some of them are still surviving today. I've kept in contact with a lady that makes etched glasses up in Muskoka. Her business is thriving. Another gentleman does maple syrup with his wife, and their business they can't keep up. And again, it's just a little mom and pop shop that they've opened up and then transitioned into the bigger sugar farms, the bigger sugar manufacturers. Maple syrup. So yeah, it's amazing. It's not like the Centennial story is local, but it's also national as well. You can go anywhere. You can apply it to any business. And also the Sir Sam's is the same thing. It's all about passion. It's about passion to take something. He said, yeah, we may have a slow year. Meanwhile, in the meantime, skiing has never taken off so well in his life, but we were closed last year for a month or so. So he goes, yeah, if it happens again, it happens again. He said, but my heart and soul is going to be in it with my family. And that's the difference. It's not just because of money. He's an accountant, so he's counting the beans. But at the same time, he said, my heart and soul is here, and that's why we wanted it.
Well, that's probably the secret sauce in terms of any future success, given the stresses that we have seen in all sectors. Family Day in Canada is coming up. And so typically there would be a number of events around Family Day, certainly here in Ontario. What do you know?
Family Day is usually a record day for all ski resorts right across the country. Well, certainly in the province. And that's something that we're going to see again. I'm a local ambassador for the Canadian Ski Council, and I was in contact with Paul Pinchback and Trish yesterday, and they said, but there's one thing we're going to announce right here. No one's ever heard this yet. The Never Ever Days, which were humongous, were so popular. Because of COVID, they've had to stop it this year in Ontario, but they're going to continue it in BC. So, and Never Ever Days, for those listening out in BC, you're going to have it. And what that is basically, the Never Ever Days is for people who have never skied before. And what you do, you pay one set fee. I think it was $30 last year, $27. You get a lift ticket, which could be ordinarily $85, $90. You get a lesson, which could be easily $40, and you get rentals, which is another $30. So roughly, easily over $150 for like $30. It's a one-day event.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fantastic, and it has been sold out right across the boards. Every year, and it bounced around from different resorts. Like it was at Mount St. Louis one week, it went to Horseshoe the next week, Glen Eden the next week. So people would follow this, and this was their pattern. And wherever they went, it was a huge success. So the Canadian Ski Council had a great idea. Unfortunately, due to COVID, will not be in Ontario this year. Again, I just found that out yesterday, but they will be in British Columbia. And as far as Family Day, the Canadian Ski Council is going to be doing something as well. They've got some plans going to take place. So our next broadcast, I can find out those details for you. But there's some exciting things happening. Again, because of COVID, we've had to back off a little bit. But people are certainly, ski resorts are more than happy to get involved with anybody that wants to learn how to ski, be part of the ski industry. And we're seeing a huge influx of people, and amount of people, and the interest this year is incredible.
Well, this is a great way to kick off this series. We took it local. We've gone regional, now national in terms of the storytelling. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of the stories from the hills. Glenn, thanks for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Dave. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Glenn Crouter, I'm Dave Traffford. This is Head for the Hills. It's an FYI podcast. If you like what you heard, follow it wherever you get your podcasts. And, well, you've already done that because you're listening to us right now. Share it and leave us a comment. Maybe there's something you want to know, or you've got a question about, or an idea, or an event coming up that we might be interested in talking about here on the podcast. Join us next week. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave Traffford.